February 23, 1999, the survival horror game Silent Hill was released. The developers, Team Silent, wanted to make a unique kind of horror game unlike anything that was out there. It was about Harry Mason. He's passing through the small town of Silent Hill with his daughter Cheryl. They get into an accident that knocks him unconscious. When he comes to, he sees that Cheryl's missing. Harry then heads into this haunted town to try to find his missing child. Silent Hill is often cited as the first true horror game, where you as the player aren't a cop or an action hero, but just a regular guy. Silent Hill did very well with critics and went on to sell over 2 million copies worldwide, which landed it a re-release under Sony's Greatest Hits label. A short time later, in the year 2000, French director Christophe Gans was working on his action-adventure drama, Brotherhood of the Wolf. Gans was a gamer, although at this point, he only played PC games. With the upcoming release of the PS2 being huge news, Gans was curious about what console games had to offer. He got a really good deal on a PS1 and picked up a few games to go with it: Resident Evil, Tomb Raider, and this new horror game, Silent Hill. He played the other two first and enjoyed them, but when he got to Silent Hill, he was floored. He said he experienced something while playing that he never felt before in a video game: fear. He called the game unsettling, one of the most terrifying experiences he'd ever been through. After playing the game non-stop all weekend, he returned to filming Brotherhood of the Wolf and told the producer, Samuel Hadida, about the game. Gans met Hadida years before on his first film, a segment within the 1993 horror anthology Necronomicon: Book of the Dead. They developed a working relationship, which led to the 1995 manga adaptation, Crying Freeman, and now Brotherhood of the Wolf. Anyway, Gans was explaining how the game was unlike anything he had ever played before. It was genuinely scary. Hadida refused to believe anyone could be scared by a video game. However, that changed when he played the game. He was stunned and agreed with Gans that they needed to jump on this property as soon as possible. Hadida had contacts in the video game world. He already acquired the rights to Resident Evil and helped to distribute the 1995 adaptation of Mortal Kombat. He reached out to Konami to talk about acquiring the rights to Silent Hill to make it into a movie. What he got was no response. Apparently, unbeknownst to him, other studios were also after the rights. The two biggest were Miramax and Tom Cruise's production company, Cruise Wagner. After seeing the mistreatment of so many video game adaptations, Konami wasn't interested. Hadida didn't give up. He left countless messages, but they all went unanswered. September 25, 2001, Silent Hill 2 was released, and Gans loved it as much as the first. Gans had a friend who was working at a TV channel that wanted to interview him about being a gamer. Gans agreed to the interview, but only if they also shot a separate segment where he was able to explain how much Silent Hill meant to him. So Gans sat at a table with a Silent Hill 2 figure in front of him. For the next 37 minutes, he talked frankly about his love for the series and why he wanted to make the film. He then had it subtitled into Japanese and sent it to Konami. The tape made its way to Team Silent. They went into a boardroom and watched the tape in its entirety. The team was blown away by his affection for the series and his honesty. He obviously was well versed in the game and knew what he was talking about. As luck would have it, right around this time, Brotherhood of the Wolf was released in Japan. Akira Yamaoka, the sound designer for Silent Hill, saw the film and loved it. He said, "That guy can do Silent Hill. He's crazy about it, and he's going to respect what we've done." Konami then reached out to Gans and Hadida to let them know they wanted him to helm the picture. Although right when they accepted, Gans was working on another film, an adaptation of the French comic series, Rahan. He had Mark Dacascos back from Brotherhood of the Wolf to play the lead. However, the studio that was funding it pulled out because they considered the film too risky. This ended up being a good thing. With Rahan no longer being made, Gans was able to fully focus on Silent Hill. Although Konami had a series of stipulations. The first was that Konami had to approve of the director, which they did. Gans was not to be replaced. He was the only one they wanted for the project. The second was that they had to approve of the screenplay. Gans worked with Nicolas Beaucrief, a friend and collaborator, also a gamer. The duo began playing the games while writing down dialogue in key moments. During this time, Gans was thinking that it might be a better idea to adapt 2 to film. He said that 2 was the more emotional one. It's a beautiful story, and the best Silent Hill of all. 2 is James Sunderland's story, while 1 was Harry Mason's story but also an introduction to the accursed town. After they started working on it, they discovered it was impossible to tell that story without explaining why the town was the way it is. A sort of suburban Bermuda Triangle where you can enter but not exit. They realized that 1 laid the groundwork for the series and was a stronger entry point to make into a film. So he decided to take the framework of 1, but to incorporate a little bit of 2 in there. The more they played 1, Gans realized something. Even though the protagonist was male, he felt the motives were more maternal. He spoke to Team Silent and suggested that the lead character in the movie adaptation should be changed to a woman. As it turned out, when the team was making the game, they were switching back and forth between having the lead being a man or a woman, until finally agreeing that the lead would be a male. They were okay with this change. When Gans met with Team Silent, he was happy to discover that they were all big movie lovers. Silent Hill took influence from the films of David Lynch, movies like Jacob's Ladder, and other things. If you want to know how much influence went into Silent Hill, after you're done watching this, check out my video Every Reference in Silent Hill. It's ridiculously thorough. Gans had one condition for the movie itself. He said the movie needed Akira Yamaoka's score. Although Yamaoka was originally thinking he'd take this opportunity to go full Hollywood for the score and have an orchestra. After some time, he realized this was a bad idea. It didn't suit the film at all. So he re-recorded the music from the game for the movie. It was now 2003, and Silent Hill 3 was released, which was a direct sequel to Part 1. Gans incorporated some elements from 3 into the script as well. Gans wanted to convey an experience, not adapt a video game. He wasn't making a horror version of a video game, but rather filming a nightmare. With video game movies on the rise, Sony TriStar was now interested in distributing the film. This made Gans think about it in a different way. While he made movies for English-speaking audiences before, he was a French filmmaker. When in the beginning phases of Silent Hill, he was toying with the notion of making it in French. Brotherhood of the Wolf was the most successful genre film ever released in France up to that point. While he's proud of that film and his heritage, most of his favorite films of all time are in English. With TriStar wanting to distribute, he decided it would be a better film to make in English. Although with English not being his first language, Gans realized the dialogue in the film would need help. He wanted to bring in another writer to fix that, so he reached out to Roger Avary. Avary was a writer, director, and gamer. He was also an Oscar winner for co-writing Pulp Fiction with Quentin Tarantino. Originally, he was just brought in to help with the dialogue, but over time, he moved into doing a full rewrite of the script. He completely disassembled what was previously written and started piecing it back together in his own way. Gans and Avary were now working together to fine-tune the script. They used the strategy guides for the games to help give them ideas. The script ended up being a mix of the first 3 games. The structure was 1, some of the monsters and details were from 2, and some background elements were from 3. Gans said it would look like an adaptation of 1, but really, it's a digest of 1, 2, and 3. However, the most important thing was that it remained true to the spirit of the games. Gans felt that some changes were okay, as long as it was faithful to the source. If not, the whole thing would be lost. Harry Mason was now Rose DeSalvo, as an homage to Andrew DeSalvo from Silent Hill 4. They brought in the new character of the husband, Christopher, who was written to look like Harry. They also changed the daughter's name from Cheryl to Sharon. From my understanding, they changed it so they wouldn't have so many characters that had names that started with C. They incorporated numerous things that were linked to women: witches, sisterhood, maternity, and an immaculate conception. They made Silent Hill a matriarchy, run by the cult zealot Christabella. It was a multi-month process to hammer out a first draft, which was completed in January of 2005. It was about the DeSalvo family. They have an adopted child who recently started sleepwalking and having nightmares about a town called Silent Hill. Silent Hill was abandoned in the 1970s due to a massive fire under the town that made the place unlivable. While designing the look of the town, Gans said he took a large influence from the 1950s French film Orphée, better known to US audiences as Orpheus. Avary was doing research for the script and was fascinated by the town of Centralia. Centralia is a town in northeast Pennsylvania. No one knows for sure how it started, but in 1962, there was a coal fire in the mines under the town that spread throughout the entire area. It stayed open despite the fires burning, As smoke, toxic gas, and sinkholes started to become more commonplace, they had to take action. The town was condemned in 1992, but there were still people who lived there because legally, the state can't force them to leave. With the depth of the coal veins, it was speculated that the fire could burn for another 250 years. As of 2020, there were only 5 people left in the town. Once they all pass away, the state has plans to raise the ground and try to extinguish the fire once and for all. Running through the town was PA Route 61. It stayed open after the town was closed, but due to the instability of the ground, the road was closed and PennDOT built a permanent detour in 1993. The closed road became a destination for urban explorers, many of whom tagged the road with spray paint, giving it the name Graffiti Highway. On a side note, I've been to Centralia many times over the years. The road's filled with huge cracks, with smoke pouring out, and the road is littered with graffiti, with numerous references to Silent Hill and Resident Evil. In 2020, during the pandemic, they saw a major increase in people exploring the town. While the town always attracted visitors, this was more than usual. Some buzzkills, the people who own the rights to the property, decided to go in and cover the road with piles of dirt to discourage people from coming out to see the road. There's more to see in Centralia, but that was a major destination for most. Still, I personally think it's worth seeing while it still exists. Just know that you'll need someone who knows where to go and a 4-wheel drive vehicle. Anyway, Avery decided to incorporate Centralia into Silent Hill. The story was about a mother who loses her daughter in a scene that is very similar to the opening of the game. After she searches the abandoned town, she discovers it had been destroyed 30 years earlier in a fire. As she walks through the town, it's constantly raining ash. While in Silent Hill it was snow that was falling, they changed it to ash for the film to fit with the theme of Alessa being a witch that was burned, who ultimately destroyed the town. In the script there was more time showing the family life before they went to Silent Hill. There was even a scene where the family brought Sarah to a psychiatrist at a children's hospital. In a nod to the games, the doctor was named Dr. Kaufman, and his assistant was Nurse Lisa. Gans wanted to reduce the length of the film to get rid of anything superfluous. In the first game, the opening scene was the car accident, and then Harry waking up in the fog. Gans couldn't open the film with that, but he wanted to get to it as soon as possible. He wanted to have a brief beginning that showcased Sharon sleepwalking, and then have it lead directly into the mother and daughter going to Silent Hill. Over the course of the movie, Rose discovers her daughter is motivated by a malevolent spirit, Alessa, who's using her to get revenge on the people who wronged her. There's a lot more to that, but essentially that's the super condensed version. Avery argued with the director over the script. Gans said the movie ultimately was about revenge, and Avery said the movie should be about forgiveness. Avery said, "How can the audience identify with Alessa if all she wants is revenge?" The director dismissed his concerns, because he felt the core of the movie is this tortured girl who's getting a revenge. He thought this was absurd. It didn't matter whether or not the audience identified with the demon child. A good chunk of the movie essentially takes place in the mind of Alessa. She's inflicting on the world what was inflicted on her body. Konami and TriStar were both happy with the script, so the team moved into casting. Somewhere around this time, they changed the family name from DeSalvo to De Silva. Gans was worried because he needed an incredible young actress to play Sharon. She'd have to play 3 parts. He was considering twins for the part, since he didn't think he'd find one child actress who could do something this complicated. He was also worried because he never worked with a kid actor before, and his director friends told him horror stories about working with kids. In 2004, he saw a show called Kingdom Hospital. Within the show, there was a very impressive young actress, Jodelle Ferland. He reached out to her people and set up a meeting. The actress arrived, and the director was shocked by her composure and willingness to do the role. He asked if she ever read the script, and she did. "Were you scared?" "No, it's great." He told her, "You're going to have to play 3 parts, and one of them is the devil." She looked at him and said, "I've always wanted to play the devil." At that point, he knew she was 100% right for the part. He said Jodelle was both adorable and frightening. They looked for the lead Rose and hired Australian actress Radha Mitchell. Gans saw the 2001 drama The Majestic and was impressed by American actress Laurie Holden. She was hired to play the cop Sybil, although the actress was very sad when she discovered she had to cut off all her hair. For the mother Dahlia, he hired Deborah Kara Unger. Gans had a working relationship with her for 10 years, starting all the way back in 1995, when he had her do a voice in Crying Freeman. He wrote the character of Dahlia with her in mind. Rounding out the cast, he hired Sean Bean as Christopher and Alice Creed as Christabella. The movie was going to be a French-Canadian co-production. At the time, Canada had useful grants for movies made in Canada. There was also an advantageous exchange rate, so their money went further there. The budget was originally $30 million. Gans loved the Guillermo del Toro movie, Mimic, and the Stephen Norrington film, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He knew both films had problems behind the scenes, but from a production standpoint, they looked incredible. He said about hiring the technicians who worked behind the scenes on both of these movies. He hired the cinematographer Dan Lautzen, who worked with him on Brotherhood of the Wolf. When he met with Lautzen, he already had about 500 pages of storyboards. Lautzen said he was so precise in his vision, he knew exactly how he wanted it to look. He hired Carol Spear as the production designer. She was David Cronenberg's production designer, who worked on movies like Existenz and Crash. They needed to find somewhere to physically be their Silent Hill, and that ended up being the town of Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. This was a small town, about an hour outside of Toronto. Within the town, there was a street that was in severe disrepair. The production team saw it and said it already looked like Silent Hill. It just needed fog. They knew if they weathered it further and added ash and dust, it would be perfect. They redressed the buildings, changed the colors, and made the street look like it had been abandoned for 30 years. They also added little in-jokes like empty rooms, since in the game there were all these buildings, but most of them were just empty rooms. Spear looked at photos of Chernobyl for reference to what happens when buildings are abandoned and they age. She also looked at photos of Centralia, as well as old hospitals, since the final act had a big scene in a hospital. Gans wanted to recreate some of the camera moves from the game. The problem was, in the game, it's all virtual space. To recreate some of the camera moves, they had to have movable walls to mimic the camera moving like it was just floating in the air. They had to build some sets like a puzzle that you could open and close as needed. In one scene, if you look, you can see the one wall closing, which is almost covered by the actor. The mountain road was built in a studio. They said shooting on a real road would have cost too much and wouldn't be easy to control. So they built this massive paved mountain road, complete with a cliff. They put the whole thing together in about 8 weeks. The outdoor scenes would need ash, but they didn't want to use real ash as it would be too hard to control and would be messy. They contacted a company called Core to add the fog and ash in as a visual effect. That way they could control the density of the fog, as well as animating the ash to make it seem like it's alive. Gans needed to shoot some parts of the film very dark. The issue was, how do you do this properly on film? When shooting dark scenes on film, the grain shows up more, and it's hard to control as you spend a lot of your time trying to figure out how much light you need for each shot. Gans was doing screen tests with HD video, and found he could shoot the scenes as dark as he needed and still be able to retain definition. He shot some test footage of a woman walking, only being lit with a lighter, versus the same footage with film. The DP was against this, but once he saw the footage, he couldn't argue the results. So it was decided the movie would be the first film HD video hybrid. Some would be shot on film, and the dark scenes would be on HD video. Filming started April 25th, 2005, under the codename Centralia. The shoot would take place in and around areas in Hamilton, but also on sound stages in Toronto. They hired creature designer Patrick Tatopoulos, who worked on Independence Day, Pitch Black, and Underworld. He was in charge of designing all the monsters. Gans had all the monsters picked out. Each of them would be from the first 2 games. The monsters were the children, also sometimes called the Mumblers from Silent Hill, the Creepers from 1 and 2, the Patient Demons from 2, the Nurse Demons from 2, as well as the most iconic monster of the series, Red Pyramid Thing, which later became known as Pyramid Head. Although for the movie they decided to call him simply Red Pyramid. When Tatopoulos was designing the monsters, Gans told him, "I don't want disgusting, I want disturbing." Early on it was decided the creatures in the film would all be practical. They wanted to do as much in camera as possible, but some things would be enhanced in post with CG. Little subtle things. Nothing to detract from the practicals, just improvements. For example, they made the legs of the patient demon thinner and added wisps of smoke to the tar it spits out. There were practical models made for the creepers, but due to the sheer volume of them, they were the one creature they decided had to be made with CG. The director had a clear idea of how he wanted the monsters to move, so he hired dance choreographer Robert Campanella to be in charge of the creature choreography. He was there to convey the director's needs to the actors playing the monsters. They then hired a wide variety of dancers to play the parts of the monsters. The children were renamed the Grey Children. Even though there were dozens of them on film, it was all the work of one woman, Yvonne Ning. She was very small and had the right body to play a mutated child. They made the suit specifically for her. The face was twisted, and she couldn't see out the eyes, so they placed a hole in the ear that she could see out of, but mostly she would just be led around by voice commands or crew members putting her in position. She did countless moves separately, which they filmed on a green screen and then composited them all together, making it look like it was a whole army of them. The patient demon they called the Armless Man was also a dancer. They put him in a giant latex slip-on suit that looked like a giant condom, which earned him the name Trojan Man. The minor masks were regular minor masks turned inside out. Gans wanted to add a bit of his own lore to Silent Hill to leave his mark, as it were. To do this, he created the monster, the Janitor, for the janitor that raped Alessa. He had Campanella play the part. The legs were prosthetic, anchored to his back, and he wore his green Kermit pants so the effects guys could key it out in post. The nurses were dancers and a few strippers. They fitted them in skin-tight outfits that matched the demon or bubble-headed nurses from 2. Campanella also ended up playing the iconic Red Pyramid. He was wearing special boots, which made him 7 feet tall. They used his apron to help cover them up. While in the game Silent Hill 2, Red Pyramid was thinner. He was designed here to be more muscular, with a larger right arm that he uses to drag around his giant sword. Red Pyramid was meant to be the masculinity, invading the town full of women. The sword was very intentionally phallic. The Red Pyramid mask was made of lightweight materials, but after it was all painted, it ended up weighing 12 pounds. This made the actor's neck just a little bit sore. The monsters were the people in town from Alessa's past. They were all humans suffering for their sins. The team decided they would use every camera trick they had to help enhance the film. Running the film in reverse, putting the footage at different speeds, and so on. Gans knew sound would play a huge part in the film. On top of the score by Yamaoka, he hired Nicholas Becker, who was one of the best European sound designers. He made the weird noises for the film. For the Grey Children, he hired deaf and mute actors. He asked them to talk, sing, shout, and was able to take those noises and manipulate them with sound tools. The actors enjoyed this because they said it was something they rarely have the opportunity to do. He asked the dancers to make fake orgasm sounds, which they also modified in post to make very creepy, weirdly erotic sounds. While working on the film, Gans knew the games had a very passionate fan base. He went on various gamer message boards and asked questions, took suggestions, and listened to fans talking about what they'd love from the games. He was making this movie for them. When Gans was playing Silent Hill, he came to the realization that cinema now had an unbelievably unexpected competitor. Games were going to overtake the movies because not only were they telling these stories better, but they were allowing you to actually take part in them. He could tell that by talking to the audience, this film would resonate more with gamers than with casual moviegoers. Gans wanted to be extremely faithful. During the production, Gans had a PS2 and a copy of the game on set at all times. He'd play the game to show the actors the precise moments he wanted to recreate. Many of the camera angles and elements were lifted right from the games. When Rose arrives in Silent Hill, the winding camera following her through the alley is nearly identical. This was a complicated shoot. In total, they built over 100 sets because they all had to have multiple versions of the same set. One is Silent Hill 30 years ago. One is 2004, which is when the film was taking place, the Fog World, and the Rust World, or Dark Alessa's Psyche. They treated the decor in the film like a sick body, withered and failing, sick with cancer. They found an abandoned school, which they redressed the interior and used as both the school and the hospital. To accentuate Rose's further descent into the madness of the town, Rose had close to 100 versions of her outfit that slowly changed shades over the course of the film. It starts brown, then gray, and then blood red. The changes are so subtle, you don't notice as you're watching. Towards the end, there was a flashback sequence that was supposed to take place in the past to explain what happened. The problem was, the scene as it was written was too long and they were running out of time. So they had to come up with an alternative. Gans took the footage that was shot and gave it to a friend who did animations for DVD menu screens. He warped the footage, made it look old and worn, burned out Super 8 footage. It now looked like spliced footage of a lost film. They added a voiceover explaining what happened within the footage, which helped to speed things along and cover up for any moments they weren't able to film. This took a lengthy, expensive sequence and cut it down to a cheaper 6-7 minutes. The ending as it was originally written had Rose arriving at the meeting place. Then Alessa calls forth 6 red pyramids that unleash her revenge on the cult members within the church. Problem was, they only had about a day and a half of filming left. It was impossible. They only had 1 red pyramid, and they'd have to film him multiple times and overlay him into scenes like the Grey Children. After talking to the team, they came up with another idea. Rose brings Alessa into the church so she can finally unleash her vengeance. Alessa comes up from the floor in her hospital bed. This was inspired by the boss in Silent Hill 2. Gans then added a little nod to his favorite anime, Urotsukidoji, Legend of the Overfiend. Although instead of tentacles, Dark Alessa has barbed wire shoot out all over and eviscerate the cultists. In further hentai, it goes up Christabella's legs and out her mouth. The girl in the hospital bed wasn't Jodelle, but a body double. At this point, Gans put together a rough cut of the film that was about an hour and 45 minutes. He had a screening for TriStar, and they were very confused. They wanted to know why there were so many women in this film. They said, "There's no men in this. It's too feminine." As a way to fix this, they asked him to incorporate Sean Bean into the film more. TriStar felt the movie was a little too out there, and they needed someone grounded who would explain what was going on to the audience. So they wrote Sean Bean's character as the audience insert to explain things to people who aren't familiar with the games. In the original cut, Sean Bean is only in the film in the beginning and in the end. Now taking a bit of inspiration from Silent Hill 2, they had to make some scenes of him going to Silent Hill to look for his wife. They also expanded the story for the police officer Gucci, who would help him for part of the film. Officer Gucci was played by Kim Coates. The movie, like the games, had countless homages. Brahms the gas station, some of the store names, the Midwich School, and the street names. As a callback to her original name, they threw in some graffiti of Cheryl while Rose is searching for Sharon in the beginning. At one point, while Rose is trying to remember the way through the hospital, she says the Konami code. Almost the entire score for the film was from the games in the series, with the exception of Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire. They even added tracks from 4, but none of the story since it wouldn't fit in here, but maybe in the next one. The movie was shot in 60 days. The budget ended up being closer to $40 million by the end. Although I've seen some places listed as $50 million, but I couldn't get a definite hard number, so I'll just say it was somewhere between $40 to $50 million. Still a drop in the bucket when you consider Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time cost $200 million. Gans put together a new cut with the additional scenes, which clocked in at 2 hours and 7 minutes. Gans looked at it and was sure that people at TriStar would think the movie was dragging on too long, and asked him to edit it down. He then suggests cutting the Christopher scenes. The film at 1 hour 45 minutes had a better rhythm. It explained itself and didn't need those scenes. He screened the movie for TriStar in Los Angeles, and at the end, they said, "That's it!" The scenes the director was hoping to be able to convince them to cut was what they said the movie was missing, so the movie would be released as it was, with a few minor notes. They wanted a few lines re-recorded, but that's about it. Gans said the original 1 hour 45 minute cut was the real version of the movie, but what TriStar wanted was an acceptable compromise. He was able to make the movie he wanted to make, with the addition of some unnecessary scenes. When the film was sent out for a rating, Gans was shocked. He was expecting to have to dial back some of the violence, but all of it was approved. In the US, it got an R. In England, it got a 14. and in France it got a 12. He read the censor's comments, who said the low score was because the whole thing took place in an imaginary world. It was also a woman looking for her daughter without using weapons. She fights back with her courage, and not guns. The censors saw this as a positive. It was intelligence versus barbarism. Silent Hill was released into theaters on April 21st, 2006. It grossed over $100 million worldwide, and was considered the first truly good video game adaptation. Although Roger Ebert, being wrong again, gave the film 1.5 stars and said he didn't understand it. It was difficult to follow and illogical. While gamers loved the film, it seemed like some mainstream moviegoers weren't as happy. The film is supposed to be visceral fear, not jump scares, not gratuitous, nightmarish and disturbing. So some American audiences didn't like this. They didn't want an atmospheric, thought-provoking horror film. They wanted a funhouse. Although when it came to the further problems that people had with the film, it seemed the biggest were the Sean Bean scenes that felt completely out of place and unnecessary, almost like they were forced in there after the fact. Most everyone said the film would have had much better pacing if not for those scenes. At an event for the film, Gans was talking with a representative of Sony. They told him Silent Hill was a flop in France. They said the game only sold about 150 copies in the entire country. The director laughed and said, 150? 2 of those are mine! The poster for the film, with Sharon having no mouth, was too much for graffiti artists to resist. They drew on fake mouths or placed stickers on there, with my personal favorite being the Rolling Stones one. As you can imagine, since the film was a hit, TriStar asked Gans to make a sequel. There was talk that Roger Avery would work with Gans on the sequel. This fell apart on January 13th, 2008, when Avery was arrested for manslaughter from a DUI. His passenger was killed. He was charged in 2009 and sentenced to 1 year in work furlough, where he'd work his job during the day, but then return to the furlough facility each night. He very stupidly made some tweets complaining about his time in prison, which caught the attention of the authorities, who revoked his furlough and made him spend the rest of his sentence in Ventura County Jail. He was released in 2010 and then served 5 years probation. Now the producer, Samuel Hadida, spoke to Gans about how he wanted to change things for the sequel. While working on Silent Hill, Hadida produced the first 2 Resident Evil movies and was working on the third. He wanted Gans to make the sequel less atmospheric and more action, like the Resident Evil movies. Gans flat out told him that Silent Hill is not, and never should be, about action. It's a walking nightmare. Hadida said that was too bad because he was going to Resident Evilize the sequel regardless. TriStar wanted Gans to helm the sequel, but with a change in direction from the producer, he turned it down. Hadida hired MJ Bassett, the director of Solomon Kane, to make Resident Evil Revelations in 3D. This would be a loose adaptation of 3. As a courtesy to TriStar, Gans met with the director of Silent Hill Revelations. No offense to this new director, but he could see this was not a film he wanted to be involved in. There's an interesting story of how all this went down, which I might be able to tell one day, but not today. I genuinely wonder why Konami had so much quality control over the first one, but then all that seemed to go out the window with the sequel. Gans went off to work on an adaptation of the video game Onimusha, but unfortunately the producers got cold feet and that whole production was halted. Now that Silent Hill was on home video, Gans was happy to see some editors took the movie and removed all the Christopher scenes, releasing the movie out on the torrents as the true version of Christophe Gans' Silent Hill. When Akira Yamaoka was waiting to see the film, he had his doubts, but loved it when he saw the finished version. Although I couldn't get word on exactly which version he saw. Konami, in another boneheaded decision, dissolved Team Silent because they wanted Western developers to make future Silent Hill games. Team Silent did Silent Hill 1 through 4, and now they handed off the franchise to Climax Studios, who made Silent Hill Origins. Double Helix was put in charge of the next in the main series, Silent Hill Homecoming. The new team really liked the effect of the town being skinned when it goes to the Rust world, so they incorporated that effect into the game. Here we are now 20 years after the release of Silent Hill. and many still consider it the best video game movie ever made. Gans had been trying for years to work on the sequel, and it looks like it's finally happening. This time, he's doing Silent Hill 2 proper. He first got the green light to do this back in 2022, and he's been working on it ever since. During that time, the positivity got Konami to actually look at their games, and they handed Silent Hill 2 off to Bloober Team, who made a fairly well-received remake of 2 that's now the best-selling entry in the franchise. Return to Silent Hill is something that fans have been wanting for years, an atmospheric, scary sequel, not an actiony offshoot like Revelation. If this is a success, he might be able to do a proper version of 3, and it would be cool to see him do The Room as well. Hideta sadly died in 2018, which is a shame, but it does mean that he won't have any influence over this like he did with Silent Hill Revelations. So I have my fingers crossed that this will be as good or possibly better than the original. We'll find out soon. The movie adaptation of Silent Hill is no small feat. I love Silent Hill, the game franchise, and the movie. I even have a seal of Metatron that sits on my desk. Production for the film began in 2004, but filming didn't start until 2005. They put an overwhelming amount of time and effort into pre-production, something that's becoming a lost art unto itself in this fix-it-and-post mentality world. Gans didn't want to deliver just a game. He wanted a completely new experience in the theme of the game. Fans of the games already knew what would happen, so he decided to deliver an experience rather than an adaptation, which I think is the correct way to do it. Even people who don't like the film admit that visually it looks amazing. Gans said the movie may not be the best video game adaptation, but it's the most faithful. In the end, the movie is a unique clash that worked because you had a very passionate and talented director at the helm. A game made by Japanese developers, set in America, and adapted to film by a French director.
Now to introduce you to my favorite character on set. This is my unborn fetus. Now I'm not afraid to say I have a lot of love for this guy.